The sun dipped low over the Texas plains, painting the horizon in strokes of orange and gold. The air smelled of hay, dust, and faint lavender from the wildflowers that grew stubbornly along the fence line. It was another quiet evening at the Carson ranch, quiet except for the laughter of children playing in the yard. Luke Carson, a broad-shouldered cowboy with a steady gaze and a heart that had known too much loss, leaned against the porch post watching his 4 children chase each other through the fading light. Life had carved deep lines in his face, but there was warmth behind his eyes. A man hardened by tragedy, yet softened by love. His wife Anna had died 3 winters ago, leaving him with a ranch to run and children too young to understand why Mama wasn't coming back. Since then, Luke had raised them alone, with patience, grit, and a tenderness no one expected from a man who carried a gun on his hip. That evening, as the wind began to hum low across the fields, a wagon approached from the main road. Dust trailed behind it like a shadow. Luke straightened up, hand instinctively resting near his holster, until he saw who it was. A slender woman in a travel-worn dress climbed down slowly, clutching a small suitcase and a Bible. Her hair was swept back neatly, her face pale and tired but dignified. She wasn't from around here. Her soft city shoes gave her away instantly. The children stopped their play, eyes wide with curiosity. "Evening, ma'am," Luke called out. "You lost?" The woman hesitated before answering, her voice quiet but firm. "No, sir. I believe I'm right where I'm supposed to be. My name is Clara Dawson. I was told you needed a teacher for your children." Luke studied her for a moment, noting her delicate frame and the way she tried to hide her nervousness. "That I do," he said finally, tipping his hat. "You come a long way for a little job." She smiled faintly. "Some journeys are longer on the inside than they are on a map." Luke didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded and called to the kids. "Boys, help Miss Dawson with her things." The children hurried over, eager and polite, a credit to their father's firm hand. As Clara stepped onto the porch, she caught sight of the sunset bleeding across the sky, and for a moment she forgot how heavy her heart was. That night over supper she learned about life on the ranch, the early mornings, the long rides, the cattle drives, and the laughter that somehow still lived here despite the emptiness left by a woman's touch. Luke, meanwhile, couldn't help but notice the way Clara listened, not out of politeness, but with genuine warmth, as if she could hear the heartbeat beneath every word. Over the next few weeks, Clara settled into ranch life. She taught the children reading, manners, and songs that made them giggle under the oak tree. Luke often watched from afar, his heart both comforted and unsettled. There was something about her, a sadness she carried like a quiet shadow. One evening after supper, Luke found her sitting on the porch steps, her Bible open but unread. The moonlight traced her face, soft and distant. "You ain't from the country, are you?" he said, leaning on the railing. She shook her head. "No, I grew up back east. My father was a preacher. I came here after—" Her voice faltered. "After what?" Luke asked gently. She closed the Bible. "After my husband passed. We were married just a year. He died in the war. And before he did, the doctor told me I could never have children." Luke fell silent, the night wind whispering through the grass. She expected pity or surprise, but he just smiled softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Well," he said, "I reckon that's good news." She frowned. "Good news?" He nodded toward the window where the children's laughter echoed faintly. "I've got enough kids for both of us." For a moment, she just stared at him, the weight she'd carried for years lifting, replaced by something fragile and new, a quiet hope. Luke didn't reach for her hand or say another word. He just tipped his hat, smiled, and walked back into the house. But in that small moment under the stars, something changed between them, something neither of them could name yet. From that night on, Clara's lessons weren't just about reading and writing. She began teaching Luke's children about love, loss, and courage. And Luke, in turn, taught her how to live again, how to laugh, how to mend a fence, how to trust the dawn after a dark night. As autumn painted the plains in gold, Clara realized she wasn't just teaching, she was healing. And every sunset, Luke would find himself standing beside her on that same porch, watching the sky burn down to embers, wondering how a broken woman could make his home feel whole again. Winter came early that year, and with it came silence. the kind that only wide-open land can hold. The wind howled through the ranch, rattling the windows and whistling through the barn. But inside there was warmth. The smell of stew, the crackle of the fire, the laughter of children, all of it wrapped around Clara like a blanket. She had grown used to the rhythm of the ranch, to Luke's quiet strength, to the way his children clung to her skirts when they were afraid of thunder. But something deeper was growing too, something she didn't dare name. Every morning when Luke rode out before dawn, she found herself watching the horizon until he disappeared. And every evening when he returned dusty and tired, she was there on the porch, waiting with supper and a smile she didn't realize she'd been saving just for him. One cold evening, as snow began to fall, the youngest child, Emma, tugged at Clara's sleeve and whispered, "Miss Clara, will you be our new mama?" The question struck her heart like a spark. She smiled weakly and brushed a curl from Emma's forehead. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm just your teacher." Emma shook her head. "Papa smiles more since you came." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, staring at the snow-dusted fields. Could she ever be part of this family? Could a woman who couldn't bear children ever be a mother in spirit? The next morning, Luke found her outside, wrapped in a shawl, watching the sunrise. He handed her a steaming cup of coffee and leaned beside her. "Kids told me they've been asking you questions," he said with a grin. She looked down. "I don't want to confuse them." He took a deep breath. "Clara, these kids, they lost their mama. But you came here and filled a space I didn't think could be filled again. You gave them hope. You gave me hope." Her eyes glistened. "Luke, I told you. I can't have children." He smiled softly, the same way he had that night on the porch. "And I told you I've got enough kids for both of us." She laughed through her tears and he took her hand, rough from work but gentle as ever. "What I need ain't more children, Clara. What I need is someone who'll love the ones I've got, and maybe love me too, if that's not too much to ask." The wind stilled. The morning light turned golden. Clara's heart finally found its answer. She nodded, her hand tightening in his. "I already do." They married the following spring under the oak tree where the children had once played. The whole town came, cowboys, neighbors, even the preacher from the next county. Luke stood tall in his clean hat and boots, and Clara walked down the aisle with sunlight in her hair. When the preacher said, "You may kiss the bride," Luke did so softly, reverently, as though sealing a prayer that had taken years to find its way home. Life on the ranch changed after that, not in noise or in grandeur, but in peace. Clara became the heart of the Carson family. She taught, cooked, prayed, and loved like she'd been born for it. Every child she tucked into bed was hers in spirit. Every sunrise she shared with Luke reminded her that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choice, faith, and second chances. Years later, when people spoke of the Carson Ranch, they said it was the happiest place for miles, not because it was big or wealthy, but because it had been built by love born out of brokenness. And sometimes when the sun dipped low and the sky turned to gold, Luke would wrap an arm around Clara and whisper, "Told you so." She'd laugh and lean against him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, you did, Cowboy. Yes, you did."